Welcome into WNBA today, and it's so exciting to be with you guys on this Friday. It's the second show, but things are heating up in the WNBA. We saw that rookie competition go down last Friday, and we were so excited to break that game down for you all. Not to mention is that I think it lived up to the hype. Caitlin Clark versus Angel Reese, and plus Caitlin Clark living up to the hype and expectations of helping her team have playoff hopes and dreams, which is kind of where we started the show last week. We talked about the MVP competition, we talked about the title competition, and where the season is leaning and heading as all these teams battle it out to make it into a postseason. But before we get into any postseason conversation, we've got to see where the title odds lie, because as teams start to win, as teams start to wither out, as streaks are snapped and broken, things start to move around. So let's take a little gander at what's going on thus far when it comes to the title. You got, of course, the New York Liberty sitting at the top at plus 110 because they continue to stride through successfully. Regardless of Brianna Stewart being their leading lady to get the job done, they've got those other characters that are coming in and being massively supportive in major roles to keep them successfully at the top. Then Las Vegas Aces still hanging tight in that second place spot, plus 340 here. We talked a number about how this team was kind of struggling defensively, how they were only relying on supporting players to get the job done for them, but we started to see some turnaround in their game in the last week, which crucially makes him an important team to watch and eye as they try to make that comeback or that return into the finals. Then you've got the Minnesota Lynx. I think I shared my love for Minnesota desperately last week, and outside of that, I think that they have continued to live up to expectations, and Collier is just undeniably one of the best players in the WNBA. Shortly behind them is the Connecticut Sun at plus 600. This has been an interesting team to gauge and watch. We've talked to Coach Young here at SportsGrid TV. We've talked to Kate Constable. We've talked to a number of people to see what's going on with this team. Is their defense going to continue to be a developmental point for them to be successful? Are they going to be able to have this inspiring wordplay there on offense where they can compete with these top teams that we're talking about in the title competition? Shortly behind them is the Seattle Storm. Then you've got the Indiana Fever. This is probably where we should lock in for a hot second because, as I mentioned at the top of this segment, you've got Caitlin Clark who's helping pull her team through. You guys have heard me go on and on and on about Kelsey Mitchell and how crucial she has been for this team. But they have made a massive rally to get into the playoff conversation. Put this into perspective. When this season started, this team was a whopping 1-8. They couldn't tie a game together. They couldn't rally for 4 quarters, and now they're the kind of team that everybody is fearfully looking over their shoulder at, seeing where Caitlin Clark and company are going to come into competition when it comes to playoffs. Right underneath them, we've got the Phoenix Mercury, and then we have the Atlanta Dream, Chicago Sky, and then the Dallas Wings hanging out at the end there. Now, the interesting part about the Dallas Wings sitting in that last slot, and we'll talk about the playoff picture here momentarily, but they do have an offense that actually makes you want to watch the game. They do have an offense that picks up pretty well, that plays fast when they want to, but their key concept is to slow down every opponent they go against, and it's starting to work against them. You can have a top 5 offense, but if you're trying to slow down teams like the Aces and the Liberty and company, it's not going to work for you. So they're kind of running out of time to come up with a different game plan versus running out the clock, slowing down an offense, trying to rely on a defense that's extremely spotty. And let's give them some credit, folks. They have had a number of injuries working against them, but you're running into the postseason. You've got every team dealing with their own injuries. So that excuse only comes in about this much. But outside of that, that probably breaks down where the title odds lie and why. But of course, we got to figure out what this means and how this translates to the playoff picture. So let's check out where everybody is hanging out when it comes to the playoff picture and how things are going to start unraveling here shortly. We've got 36 games in total here. You got the New York Liberty sitting at the top, 28-6 record. Of course, they don't have too much competition breathing down their neck, but I will say this. If it comes down and the competition locks in any tighter, you do have some tiebreaker looking success for the Lynx at 1-1 and the Sun at 3-1. So depending on how the next 1 or 2 to 3 games, play out for the Lynx specifically and the Sun, we could be looking at a little bit of a jump here. Now, you got the Connecticut Sun who have locked in their playoff position sitting at a 24-9 record. When it comes to Connecticut, though, they are dueling with the Lynx to hold down that spot. They have 3 key games remaining in the stretch here. So keep an eye on what happens in this second spot and this third spot. Obviously, Lynx matching that record 4-9 as well. And I mentioned the duel between them and the Sun. They have actually 2 games in the pocket that are crucial for them to either be able to hop up there and successfully secure, well, it's secured, but to successfully sit at that 2 spot. Right underneath them, Las Vegas Aces, 21-12 record. And I will say this, keep an eye on any team that is clipping at the heels of the Aces. I know everybody wants to see this big rematch for the championship, but if their defense continues to struggle, and what we talked about last week wasn't just the defensive struggles, it was their road record, and it was their lack of success on the road. Postseason is highly contingent upon you being successful on the road. You can't string together top games, then you're probably looking at a knockout, which would be a big misfortune to this team, 21-12. Seattle Storm right behind them at a 20-14 record. Then, as we mentioned, you got the Fever at 18-16. I still am mind blown at the fact that they started their season 1-8. 1-8. And now they're sitting in the 6th spot as a clinched playoff team. And then you got the Mercury up here. Now, some things to keep in mind when it comes to the Chicago Sky. We got some big games tonight that can also mess with these results. But when you're talking about the Chicago Sky and kind of their misfortune as of late, you're talking about a team that's desperate to lock in a spot. They have some opportunities if they win out a couple of games here, but the hard part being that they are in a massive slump. They're finding struggles in their offense. They're not able to really pull together any wins. They're in a massive losing streak right now, which we'll get in when we get to their head-to-head. But they still have a chance to stay alive. Also, the Dream having a chance to stay alive. So 2 teams that you're going to watch very closely as they start to revolve in with the clinched blue spots for the playoff picture. But we got title odds. We've got playoffs being clinched. We're so close to the postseason. We talked about MVPs, but the names haven't really changed, so we won't go into all of that. But obviously continue to keep an eye on Wilson, Clark, Collier, and all of the top people who are making this game equally as exciting. But we've got a big slate tonight, which I'm so excited to dive into. For our Friday night slate, we have got the Aces taking on the Sun, looking at a 2.5 spread there, and a total of 164. I'm excited for tonight's best bets also. Then for the next one, we've got the Lynx versus the Fever with a 3 spread on that one, total sitting at 169.5. Wings versus the Dream. This is a big game. We talked about the fact that the Wings game plan is to slow down their opponents, slow down their offense, but you have a Dream team not working as a dream team fashionably, but a dream team that can actually push them to the limit. There's a couple of great wagers I love in that one. And then you got the Sparks versus the Sky. Again, Sky desperate for a win, but it's a lot of the numbers in the sports books really just like them to cover, but not compete in a sense of pulling out a victory tonight. So with that Friday night slate, we've got a number of previews and bets to get into. And of course, where do we typically start? We're going to start with the Fever taking on the Lynx, my Minnesota team, and we've got to see if Caitlin Clark and company continues to roll successfully. Now the betting books are all over the Fever being able to pull off not only upsets, but to continue their excelling success and compete against top teams. One of those top teams being the Lynx. Now, something else to keep in mind here for tonight's showdown between the Fever and the Lynx is the fact that this can actually be kind of a playoff preview. Depending on how the seeds pan out, these 2 teams can be tangoing in that first round. So even more reason to watch tonight's matchup, because you could be getting a preview of what we will see very shortly in the stretch here as we start to roll into preseason. So keeping all of that in mind, knowing that there's hype and excitement in a preview of playoffs between 2 top teams, you're not going to want to go anywhere, because we're going to break down what the Fever brings to the table. We're going to bring down what the Lynx bring to the table. Best player prop bets, the players that you should be looking out for outside of Caitlin Clark. So go nowhere. Stay with us here on WNBA Today on SportsGrid TV after this quick break.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to game time decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
Try and set the stage for what should be a great year of NFL action.
There's a handful of teams that potentially can compete for a Super Bowl championship.
Confusion and uncertainty this year more than some in the past.
This team looks like it's ready to make a move, but we just don't know if it's bad or good this year.
J.J. McCarthy is eventually going to take over, but it's a no-lose situation for them.
I mean, they suck. They were 7-10.
Only on SportsGrid.
Let's go.
Welcome to the Live Golf Team Championship.
The golf has been mesmerizing.
They are the Live Golf Team Champions.
Team golf is back.
Oh, yes!
Are you ready?
Let's go.
That's what champions do.
Welcome back into WNBA today here on SportsGrid TV. We just broke down some title odds, any limited or little movement that we've seen over the past week. We also went into the teams that have broke down and clinched that playoff spot, the teams that are still in the hunt. But now we got to get to this Friday night slate. We've got some really good games, and before we cut to that quick break, we talked about the fact that we might get a gander at a little bit of a playoff preview because we've got Indiana taking on Minnesota tonight. Minnesota, the number 3rd team in the WNBA, and Indiana sitting at that 6th slot. Yes, they have clawed their way into not only a playoff position, but into probably one of the top teams in the WNBA. So those two teams going at it could be a potential preview that we could see in playoffs, depending on how things shake up in the top 3 spots for Minnesota. So if that goes down, then we're already getting a little bit of an idea here. So I mentioned the fact that the Fever had this whopping 1-8 start to the season. Well, after coming back from the break, they're 17-8. And yes, a lot of that is because of Caitlin Clark. But other things to keep in mind is that the Fever got the fever. You guys know I can't miss an opportunity to have a pun on words or anything completely outrageous, but they are. They're on fire right now, and they are also on a 5-game winning streak. This is a team that's going to come in hot and try to knock out that 3rd-ranked team in the WNBA, or at least continue climbing the charts and showing everyone that they are here to compete. But let's not count out Minnesota. Let's talk about the fact that you've got one of the top WNBA players on their roster. So taking things head-to-head, of course, we've got to look at what Caitlin Clark's going to bring to the matchup tonight and what Collier is going to bring to the matchup tonight. You're looking at Caitlin Clark, who has an average of 18.9 points per game, 5.8 rebounds, 8.4 assists. I've said it over and over and over again. Caitlin Clark in the assist column is complete money. She's so consistent, and she is so stout when it comes to picking up those assists for her team. Not to mention is that the Fever aren't just hot on the road, and they aren't just hot in the rankings. They are extremely hot at home. So keep that in mind when you're looking at your wagers for tonight's matchup. Then when you check out Collier, which is obviously one of the top players to keep an eye on in the WNBA, she's crushing it statistically. First of all, averaging 20.4 points, 9.8 rebounds, 3.6 assists, and she went off in Indiana just a few games ago, putting up 31 points to help Minnesota clinch and secure a nice victory. So, obviously, where would you lean in some props for tonight? Well, it's really attractive to look at the combination for Collier, because even though her assist column might not be what Caitlin Clark's is, that's fine. She doesn't have to be Caitlin Clark, everybody. She just needs to be Collier and continue to rack up when it comes to points and rebounds, and she's sneaky good in that rebound column. So I like her to hit over 32.5 points plus rebounds plus assists, because she's going to come in hot. She's going to come in and try to compete with Caitlin Clark, and she's going to show everybody that she is one of the top WNBA players in the league. Then you've got Clark over here. Her assists kind of sit in an interesting place for me. I mean, she's constantly being able to find that double-digit mark when it comes to racking up assists. So when you see the total like 8.5, that's something that can be very attractive. Now, I get it. The Lynx are a pretty complete team offensively as well as defensively, but we've seen Caitlin Clark be able to tear apart defenses. Even if she gets off to a slow start, it's really not a deterrent for me in terms of her having an 8.5 total. This is a team that tends to pick up in that third quarter. I've had a couple of bets sometimes where the third quarter did not pan out, but on the more consistent side, third quarter is a sweet spot for the Fever as well as Caitlin Clark. I did want to point this out, everyone. There's a fun little 4-leg parlay when it comes to Caitlin Clark, because why not? She's one of the top talked about players, well, in general right now. So looking at this 4-leg parlay may be something to consider. Over 3.5 made threes. That should be an easy check. Over 5.5 rebounds, I don't particularly see why not. Over 8.5 assists, I already made my case on the fact that I feel like that sits kind of low for Caitlin Clark and her production rate right now. And over 20.5 points. This is sitting at plus 599 last time I saw. So maybe a parlay with partying with tonight on this Friday night. Now, jumping over to the next game on the slate, we've got the Aces versus the Sun. The Aces have shaken things up a little bit. Of course, they're led by the most dominant player being A'ja Wilson, and she, in the last couple of games, guys, has made 40 points look like a cakewalk. She has posted 40-point performances dominantly, and this team is getting into more of a realistic picture of competing for a championship. Their defense has started to come together, and of course, give credit where credit is due. They have weathered a number of injuries themselves. They've had to play without key players, and it's been the Wilson show carrying this entire team on her back. After Tuesday, they stay ahead of Seattle for the 4th seed in the WNBA playoff picture. I will note this. Kelsey Plum was talked about being questionable for tonight, so of course I'm going to steer clear of any props for her. I did see her in the mix when it came to looking up some FanDuel numbers, but once again, this is something that can change right when warm-ups go to take place, and I've had that issue too many times to count. Now, outside of Las Vegas, outside of their defensive issues previously, this past week has been eye-opening to the fact that they can get back into a dominant position in the WNBA. But don't count out Connecticut. I've talked about Connecticut over and over again, and they're a team that can be surprisingly sneaky. Of course, they sit in good rankings. They've dropped some games that they should have never dropped against teams that are still barely even in a playoff position, but they march in tonight with a 24-9 record and are tied with Minnesota for that second-best spot. Also, 8th in field goal shooting, 7th in three-point shooting, and the Sun are 11th in the league when it comes to field goals per game. So they obviously can come in when it's necessary for their offense to show up, but it's not their offense that makes me keep this team in any sort of conversation. It's their defense. Number 1 scoring defense in the league, to be more specific, and then for another player to keep an eye on that's probably going to be out of the lineup tonight, it's going to be Tiffany Mitchell. So the Suns' ability to create turnovers, them sitting as one of the top defenses in the league, obviously that's going to notably put you in, favorably thinking that this is going to be a much better game. When we're looking head-to-head, obviously, you've got Wilson coming in hot. I miss her storm hair because it matched her storming performance, but 12.5 rebounds over under. Look, when you're looking at what she can produce and what she can perform, she rallied 14 rebounds the other night. I'd probably smash the over on that. And then points, rebounds, and assists combined, 41.5. You know she's dropping 20 at least. If she gets double digits in the rebound column, it's only going to continue to get hot from there. So only person she has to worry about is Juana Bonner, and I think this is going to be a great competition between the two tonight. We'll break down bets that you should consider between this top matchup. So go nowhere. We've got a couple more games to preview here on WNBA Today on SportsGrid TV. Stick with us after this quick break.
buy or sell. Anthony Richardson will be a top 7 fantasy quarterback this season. We're keeping this realistic here. We know that nobody would think that he'll be in the top 3, probably not even the top 5. How about top 7, George? Buy or sell?
You know, if he stays healthy, top 5 is not out of question here at all. He's a running quarterback. We know how valuable they can be. My worry is going to be what I mentioned when we talked about the Indianapolis Colts. Boy, man, if Pittman were to go down, there's not a lot to throw. He'll be running for his life half the time there. I like Richardson a lot. Small sample size of what we saw of what he's going to be. I played the 5 games last year before the injury here. So over a longer season, we'll see if he gets to catch up to him, what he can do. He's going to have to prove he can throw the ball to be down the field here. I'm going to buy this. All right, I want to buy on Anthony Richardson. I want him to be that guy because I want to see the excitement that he can bring. That I think, smart money might say go the other way because there's so many quarterbacks in that tier that, hey, he could have a good year and still not finish top 7. That being said, I think he will show, just like he did last year, he's going to be dynamic. I'm buying top 7.
Yeah, it reminds me so much of Cam Newton in the early days, too. I'm going to sell on this. I think it's too high. I think most leagues take away points for interceptions. If that's the case, I think his numbers are going to be 20-something touchdowns, 15, 16-something interceptions. That's going to negate some stuff. Yes, he will run. Can he play an entire season? Still very questionable for me. I have him as the 9th best fantasy quarterback at the end of the season, just outside the top 7. So I'm going to go sell on that.
Welcome back into WNBA today here on SportsGrid TV, and we're working through the Friday night slate. Some betting angles and best bets that you should be keeping an eye on, and of course, we all know I love some player prop bets, especially when it comes to the WNBA conversation, because there's so many great women to bet on. So we were talking about Wilson versus Bonner, and not to mention is that this matchup, something else that I want to point out here is the fact that Bonner leads players in threes made and scoring while hauling in a team tying high of a rebound total. So also a number of things in the prop betting world to look out for when it comes to her. But I've got a betting card for you guys coming down to the stretch here. Let's quickly jump into this Wings versus Dream game because, as I mentioned at the top of the show, we've got 2 teams that are kind of within small hopes of still making the playoffs. We're not going to entirely discount them. We've seen some great games come from the Atlanta Dream, sitting 9th in the WNBA, but it's the Wings that just really can't string anything together. Surprisingly enough, a really good offense to watch. They're one of the top 5 offenses in the WNBA, rallying about 83.8 points. That's massive when you think of it, but their game plan of just slowing everything down, especially when they go against teams that are just completely overwhelming, it's not going to get them to a postseason. And the other thing that's not going to get them to a postseason is their defense letting up a whopping 90.7 points per matchup. It's not going to work. But what's some of the positives in this? Well, you got a Dallas team that also has an assist-to-turnover ratio of 1-4, that with removing their defense, emphasizing on their offense, they can compete. But you've got a Dream team, not playing like the Dream team anymore, but you've got a Dream team that can show up offensively. They're not looking as hot in the scoring column as their opponent tonight because they can only post an average of 75.8 points per game, but their defense is a top 5 defense. So when you're going against a team that lets up a lot of points and you can weather the storm defensively and kind of play a little keep away with the ball, you're probably looking to be the most favorable team in the matchup. Also, Atlanta's defense is averaging an allowance of 79.8 points per game, 27.2 defensive rebounds per game also, and guess who leads in the rebound stats and competition and conversation? Tina Charles, somebody else who should always be on your player prop card. So obviously when you're looking at a team that lets up a lot of points versus a team that knows how to contain the points and can kind of get in the mix offensively, I'm kind of gearing towards Atlanta Dream money line in this game because you just never know when the Wings are going to pull off either a massive upset or they're just going to live up to the hype of trying to slow down the game and failing defensively. Then for the last game on the docket, Sky versus the Sparks. You got Chicago in a slump. If it wasn't for the excitement of Angel Reese, well, who knows? But Sparks are coming off a 93-86 defeat versus the Fever, so they already saw a really hot rookie end play. This was their second straight loss, but they did cover a 12.5 spread, something else to gauge leaning into tonight. They'll have another problematic rookie on their hands with Angel Reese, as I already mentioned, but I don't know if she's going to be enough to get the job done. You got the Sky, who are on a very ugly 7-game losing streak, and they let up 90 points in their most recent matchup. So defensively, they're failing. They're relying heavily on their one rookie to get the job done. They have had their own circulation of whatever was going on with the mask and the injuries and all these combination of things. Too many factors kind of working against them, but maybe consider Chicago to cover the spread. You've got an extremely desperate team to get into the mix, and they do have players that can still bring value to the game and value point-wise, but as when it comes to the matchup, their defense just really is not hanging in there by any means. Which brings us to my play card for tonight. We've previewed the games. We've talked about where we're leaning. We've talked about which team's probably going to stand out. We've talked about the defensive woes, slumps, stunners, and standouts. So what do I got on the card tonight? Well, we're going to start with the Aces covering. I have them at -2.5 spread. As I mentioned, they've started to get back to their game plan. They've started to get a lot more healthy. They should be able to pan out easily here. Wilson, I like her for over 41.5 when you're combining all of the fun things, points, rebounds, and assists, because your leading lady is going to get the job done. Lynx versus Fever, I like the over total of over 169.5. As I mentioned, you got a Fever who's getting hot in the scoring column. You've got a Lynx who's one of the top teams producing-wise. And Fever's defense isn't all that sexy. So when you look at the amount of points they can rack up tonight, I think the Fever are 22-36 for going over the over total. A big reason why I also like that. Kelsey Mitchell over 23.5 combined points and rebounds. And it's going to be Bonner for me for 8+ rebounds at plus money of 210. Averages 6.3, but against big teams and big competition, she racks up those rebounds. I'm talking about like 7 rebounds minimum. So this is my play card for tonight for a number of reasons. As I talked about, we've got so many exciting games in the playbook for tonight, 4 specifically in a Fever and Lynx team that you're not going to want to miss tonight. But we got more action for you next week on WNBA Today on SportsGrid TV. Thank you guys for joining me here, and I'll see y'all next Friday.
Buy or sell, Anthony Richardson will be a top 7 fantasy quarterback this season. We're keeping this realistic here. We know that nobody would think that he'll be in the top 3, probably not even the top 5. How about top 7, George? Buy or sell?
You know, if he stays healthy, top 5 is not out of question here at all. He's a running quarterback. We know how valuable they can be. My worry is going to be what I mentioned when we talked about the Indianapolis Colts. Boy, man, if Pippen were to go down, there's not a lot further. He'll be running for his life half the time there. I like Richardson a lot. Small sample size of what we saw of what he's going to be. I played the 5 games last year before the injury here. So for a longer season, we'll see if he gets some catch up to him, what he can do. He's going to have to prove he can throw the ball. So be down the field here. I'm going to buy this. All right, I want to buy on Anthony Richardson. I want him to be that guy because I want to see the excitement that he can bring. That I think, smart money might say go the other way because there's so many quarterbacks in that tier that, hey, he could have a good year and still not finish top 7. That being said, I think he will show, just like he did last year, he's going to be dynamic. I'm buying top 7.
Yeah, it reminds me so much of Cam Newton in the early days too. I'm going to sell on this. I think it's too high. I think most leagues take away points for interceptions. If that's the case, I think his numbers are going to be 20-something touchdowns, 15, 16-something interceptions. That's going to negate some stuff. Yes, he will run. Can he play an entire season? Still very questionable for me. I have him as the 9th best fantasy quarterback at the end of the season, just outside the top 7. So I'm going to go sell on that